Well, Razorback fans, there's a lot of coaches that are on the Razorback football team that are either proven or unproven. You may like or you may dislike, but that safeties coach, I'm a huge fan. So let's talk about it on today's Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am your host, John Nabors. I am also the host of Inside Arkansas Live, which you can catch every weekday starting at noon on Inside Arkansas and InsideArkansas.com. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is looking and hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. Hope everybody's having a wonderful Tuesday as we are 16 days away from Razorback football, and we'll, of course, have some fun with that in the last segment, kind of like what we've been doing. But there's two things, though, that I wanted to discuss with you today and here this morning or this afternoon, depending on when you're listening to this podcast, about Marcus Woodson. Now, he is the safeties coach for Arkansas, and he's a guy that when Arkansas was going through that big transition from the Barry Odom side of things. You know, I was someone, and I still am a huge fan of Barry Odom, like I am. And I still believe, I mean, talked about on this podcast, but I still believe that he might be the next head coach for Arkansas. It's kind of the vibe I get, but that's neither here nor there. Don't need to talk about that. But either way, I remember how crazy it was, though, thinking that how Barry Odom had really done some really great things and had done some really good things in recruiting. He was also the safeties and the defensive coordinator coach. And that 2022 season was not it. I mean, it was Arkansas's pass defense was the worst in the country. We all know that. It's been brought up a few times. It was the worst. And whenever you're that bad, like it's not hyperbole. Like when you're dead last in all of college football, the 130 some odd teams and pass defense, that's unacceptable. Can't happen. But also when you're that bad at something, in sports in general, whatever, you know, you can talk about transfer portal and how it can fix a lot of things, and it can. But when you're that bad at something, you got to almost approach it and think of it in a way of it's going to take a year or two or three to dig out of this hole. You know, like you feel like you're so in deep, you're so buried beneath the surface, and you're just going to try to find a way to climb out, and odds are it's not going to work for you. Just not going to work for you. Well, luckily for Arkansas, though, and luckily for Sam Pittman, they did a pretty good job, I'd say, in hiring a defensive staff to replace Barry Odom. Because let's be honest, you couldn't get much worse than what Arkansas did in pass defense. And when they hired Travis Williams, I'll be honest, I was like, oh, you know, okay. It seems like he's got a lot of excitement. It seems like he's got a lot of panache and everything to go along with it. So let's give this guy a chance. Let's see. Who knows? Maybe it'll go pretty well. Maybe it'll happen all right. And it was all about what the staff was going to look like, though. Because he was having to, of course, coach the linebackers, but have new secondary coaches. Deke Adams was staying on as D-line coach. I was like, so I guess we'll find out how well he does and how well connected he is. Well, then he got Marcus Woodson. And when he hired Marcus Woodson, I was really impressed with the hire even at the time because he was coming from Florida State. And Florida State had some pretty good success, especially in the secondary. 2020 was one of their best years with him at the secondary. But Woodson was also at Auburn, where that's where he kind of met and knew Travis Williams. So connections there makes a lot of sense. But at Florida State, he was able to turn around one of the worst pass defenses in the country there and do it in a very short period of time. So when I saw that, I'm like, okay, well, he's in great. This is great then. Because if that's how it is with him, and that's what he did at Florida State, Well, he's walking into a very similar situation at Arkansas. But then the next thought hit me. I'm like, well, hold on a second. That's all well and good and great. And, he could end up being great. But that's Florida State, though. I mean, it's a bigger and better program. And they're getting high-level recruits. And they're in the state of Florida. And they're able to do this and this and this. And I almost kept talking my way into circles where it's like, I love the hire, but I'm not expecting much. I'm not expecting him to come right in and in one season turn the entire thing around, especially considering how bad it was. And then when they went to the transfer portal and they added some guys, I was like, okay, I mean, some of them will look pretty good, but none of, they didn't have that Drew Sanders level player, like that 5-star big time guy. I think that, a guy like Jaheim Singletary, there's a former 5-star, I believe, at Georgia. And, he had played at Georgia, so he had some of that access and some of that understanding. But the point was, I just still was like, okay, well, it's still going to take a little bit because he just doesn't have the Jimmies and Joes. Well, last season, folks, Arkansas ranked 32nd in pass defense, pass yards given up. 32nd. You went from 130th, essentially, to 32nd. You jumped 100 spots in one single season. Now, I don't really care, at least in the context of this conversation, about what the Razorback football team didn't do last year. They went 4-8. They weren't good. They were a bad football team last year, of course. Of course they were. We all know that. We all admit it. We all saw it. But I don't care who you are, what you do, what the season was in the context of this conversation, because I saw a guy walk in, and credit to other coaches too, but Marcus Woodson walk in and jump this team up 100 spots in pass defense. Like, imagine just doing that in any other sport at any other thing. Like Arkansas, say, in basketball and three-point shooting. I think this past season, they're like 200 and something. Imagine if they jumped up 100 spots this upcoming season. The difference it would make in the team and how it would look. Like, it wouldn't just be a slight change. We're like, oh, yeah, they did shoot a little bit better. No, it would be like, holy crap, this is a legit three-point shooting team. And it's the same thing that Marcus Woodson's had. And if you hadn't had a chance to check out this press conference, check it out on InsideArkansas.com. But he was such a approachable guy, but like knew everything about every player, talked about the improvement that they had, and was able to really do a good job in the transfer portal and recruiting and develop these guys. So the question becomes of like, how do you go from worst in the world to 30th? How do you one up that? How do you get better from that? I mean, Arkansas is returning some of the same guys from last year's secondary. Probably more than other position groups. Snacks Johnson's one of the ones that left in spring, but it looked like it was because of his spot getting taken. So if that's the case, why can't Arkansas do the same thing that they did a year ago? Now, again, I know what you're saying. You're like, okay, all right, yeah, but you keep hyping it up and drinking the Kool-Aid, and you know what? Probably so. But if I was going to put one caveat on this, if I was going to put one little concern, one little thing that's going to be bothersome, at least for me, at least how I see it, it's simply this. The Razorback defense, talent-wise, group-wise, everything, potentially could be better this year than what they were last year. That's true. But statistically, it just may not show. Because if you look at the schedule, it's hard no matter what. But folks, Arkansas, just in their home games in the SEC, the teams are playing are going to be high-flying, big-time offenses. I mean, Ole Miss, you know they're going to score. You know that Lane Kiffin's got capabilities as an offensive mind to blow it up. Tennessee, I mean, geez, that's what Heupel does is offense. That's what he does. LSU had the Heisman Trophy winner last year. I know he's not on the team anymore, but they probably know a thing or two and have known a thing or two about having an effective offense. And then also have a team called Texas, who has so many offensive pieces that they have 2 bona fide studs at quarterback, Quinn Ewers and then even Arch Manning. So the point is, Arkansas is going to face some really, really good offenses and some really good quarterbacks this season. So statistically, again, it may not show it that this team's improved from last year. But as long as Marcus Woodson's the guy, as long as he's got another opportunity to develop, and as long as they stay healthy, which is we know is the most important, I believe there's a chance. I truly believe there's a chance that this team can really, really take it to the next level. But we'll have to wait and see. But another position group on the defense that actually Marcus Woodson talked about, and it's not the secondary, that was shocking. Well, we'll just have to explain it and talk about it on the other side of the break. So stay with us here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. All right, folks, you know that here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, we're brought to you by FanDuel. We love sports. We love them so much that we never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports just aren't sportsing like we want them to. FanDuel is going to let the sports keep sportsing whenever we want, because all you have to do is open up the app and dream up any bets anytime that you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. It's FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, continuing on with the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. All right, so I wish I had the clip, and I thought I had the clip, but something happened with the downloading of it. I don't know. It's the story of my life. So I'll try to do my best to talk about it. Either way, Marcus Woodson, the safeties coach for Arkansas, was meeting with the media. And, there was nothing really crazy that he talked about, just oh my gosh, mind-blowing. But it was interesting enough. But when I was watching the press conference and kind of listening and all of that stuff, I started hearing something about linebackers. So I was like, okay, well, he's a defensive coach, and linebackers are part of the defense, and maybe they're trying to, figure some things out. But then he goes in and says that the linebackers are the strength of the defense. And goes on also to say that they are extremely deep at the linebacker position. And then goes on to say that there will be times where they could see 4 different linebackers on the field at once. Now, when I heard this, I almost spit out my Propel and crapped my pants and fired a rocket, because I was just mortified and had to rewind it almost to be like, hey, did I mishear something? Was he talking about some other linebacking crew? Because as you know, and if you've listened to this podcast or you've been checking out anything on Inside Arkansas, you know that we've talked about the problems with the linebacker. The linebacker position is very weak in depth. Now, I really like Brad Spence. I think he'll be a good guy. Xavier Sori, the big transfer from Georgia. But besides that, you got a bunch of unknowns. A bunch of guys that you have no idea how they're going to do and what they could be. So I'm looking at it as okay, how? Could it just be some coach speak that he's throwing out there and just kind of messing around a little bit and being like, oh, yeah, sure, I'm hyping up the linebackers? Sure, it could be. But how I kind of want to look at it, and I think the one that makes the most sense of the approach that he had, was that some of these guys in the secondary, or maybe some guys that are borderline, whether it's the penny position, which he talked about, or the nickel position, whatever, but they could be considered kind of a linebacker of sorts. I don't want to try to make full comparisons, but I do remember a guy by the name of Jericho Nelson. I'm sure a lot of you do remember him. But Jericho, he was one of those players that was like a hybrid at the time during the Bobby Petrino era. He played that nickel position kind of, but he was also, by his physique and his size and athleticism, he was able to kind of play the linebacker / defensive back. It was really interesting. He was about a 5'11", 6 feet tall. I mean, he wasn't huge, but his tackling ability, his field presence, and also his strength in the program that he was in was able to kind of really help him out with that. So to me, when Marcus Woodson's saying that, I feel like there's probably a big part of it where they're going to be using some secondary players, some defensive backs in that, quote, linebacker role. And if they do that, then that makes sense, you know? And I'm not trying to crap on the team or crap on the players or anything like that. I'm just trying to look at it from a logical perspective. Yeah, I know, me using logic. But seriously, like I'm trying to look at it from a logical perspective. Like, okay, so how does this make sense? You know what I'm saying? Like how can you justify that? I'm hoping that Marcus Woodson is right. He knows more football than I do. And I just went on and on about how much I liked him and respected him and thought he was a great coach. So I'm going to respect him for that and assume he probably knows a little bit of what he's talking about. But I still just cannot get over the fact that he was mentioning this about the linebackers. But say if he was able to be 100% right, say if all the things that he was talking about and mentioning the linebackers is true, and they are really deep, and they are one of the strengths, and they are going to be playing so many on the field at once, and all of that is a fact. Can you imagine how the outlook and how the field will be now for the defense that you'll have, that I'll have, that everybody will have? Because let's be honest, I feel really good about the secondary. I feel pretty good about the defensive line. But I have felt awful about the linebackers. I've been like, hey, it could be, but there's just nothing that we've seen until we actually see him on the field that could allude to the fact that it's going to be really good. But if he's right, and if this defense and these linebackers are actually that, folks, this could be a really successful year for Arkansas. I'm not doing this to gas anybody up. I'm just being honest and playing the what-if game because that's what it is. It's like if that linebacking crew is that good, I mean, what would then be the weakest part of the team? Like, where's your concern coming in? Not to say you can't have any concerns, but I'm talking about major concerns. Because I don't care what anybody says. I don't have a major concern on this team except for linebacker and a really close major concern would be the offensive line. But I still believe that they're going to be better and improved, and they've done the right things to change that. But the linebacker's been the only one that I've been like, yeah, this is bad. This ain't it. So if they remedy that problem, they fix that problem, man, try not to have too much fun this season, folks. Try not to tailgate too much. Try not to storm the field too many times and beating Texas and all these other teams because it could be a really fun season, which, again, I'm hopeful that it is. I'm really hopeful that it is. All right, well, we'll talk about it being 16 days away from Razorback football and talk about the number 16 as well and have some fun with that. So stay with us here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. All right, folks, passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keep your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. So with all the parts you need at all the prices you want, it's easy to make sure that your car has the MVP and you can bring home those huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, so final segment here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. We are, as was mentioned, 16 days away from Razorback football starting up. It's exciting times, right? I'm excited. I'm pumped by it. And it's going to be weird, though, Thursday night, UAPB in Little Rock. It's not the first time it's happened. In fact, ironically enough, it's happened pretty recently. 2017 was the last time Arkansas played a Thursday night game, and it was the first game of the season, and it was in Little Rock. And I believe it was FIU. No, it was FIU. Or no, it was Florida A&M. Florida A&M, that's who it was. It's Florida A&M, and I remember that game because they got... it was either, I think it was a personal foul, I believe, or a 15-yard penalty or whatever to start every quarter because they had illegal uniforms. And I was just like, how? That's neither here nor there. So they're going to be having another Thursday night game. And so 16 days away. You know what's funny is that every time I thought of 16, it was always Mitch Mustang. Always. Like, not just recently, but in history, because there wasn't a whole lot of 16s in Razorback history. It was a very much of a quarterback number, but you think about it, like, you've seen 10, 9, 8, 7, 10, 12, 11. You haven't seen 12 because it's retired, but 13 had some, 14, 15, 17 we even talked about, which shout out to Tavares Jackson, rest in peace. He was another one that was 17, 18. So 16 was just like Mitch Mustang's number. That's how it always was. Until there was a guy by the name of Traylon Burks who decided that he wanted to wear number 16 and completely erased any like connection or correlation that I have with that number with the number 16, like with Mitch Mustang. And I have no problem with Mitch. I'm not talking like an insulting. It was just, he was that good. Traylon Burks was that good. He was one of those players, man. It's like you get a once in a generational type player. And you may think I'm overstating that, but I'm not. Like, Traylon Burks, to me, was, I think he might be the best wide receiver in Razorback football history. I'm not talking about numbers, but I'm just talking about, man, if you had, like, he had all of it. He could jump. His hands were massive. He caught everything. He burned players. Like, he was faster than all of them. Like, my favorite play, and they ran it many times, was when it was one-on-one coverage. If they had somebody one-on-one with Traylon Burks, get out of here. It's over. You're toast. Because he would burn them every single time. So just a freak athlete. And I know he's dealt with some injuries in the NFL, and hopefully he finds a way to, navigate through that and stay at it and end up being a great player there in the league. But when I think 16, I always think of Traylon Burks. And I think hopefully fans don't underappreciate him or like forget about him. Because, he was part of that. Like the fact that, he had the Chad Moores the first year, and then his COVID was his second year. And then he had a really good year in 2021. But, man, it just makes me, I don't want to play the what-if game or all that too much. But, man, imagine if Traylon Burks was a wide receiver with a Bobby Petrino coached offense. Man. Like, what that would be like. And I think Arkansas's got some really good wide receivers this year. Don't get me wrong. But, man, that would be a lot of fun to watch. So, 16 days away, folks. Traylon Burks days away from Razorback football. Closer and closer each day. So, either way, appreciate all of you listening in and watching in to the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or on Google Play. You can also get after me on Twitter, BuzzJohnNabors. BuzzJohnNabors. I haven't done that. I did it again. Shows how tired I am. John Nabors Show is my social media handle if you actually want to get on there. So, questions, comments, concerns, you can hit me up on there. Keep it going from there. Same podcast time, same podcast channel tomorrow afternoon. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you then.